This is Jessie, and you're listening to the Curious Cabinet Podcast. It's December 6th, 1991. Just like any other year, Christmas trees are up, Christmas music plays over the speakers of every store you walk into. Everyone is full of cheer and throwing Christmas parties for the holidays. Usually, it's a spectacular time of the year. But this day in this North Austin town was only marked by tragedy. It was a normal day at the yogurt shop on 2606 Guadalupe Street near the North Cross Mall in northern Austin, Texas. I Can't Believe It's Yogurt was a chain shop that was a popular hangout for teens in the early 1990s. On that night, December 6, 1991, two employees closed the store. Jennifer Harbison and Eliza Thomas did their usual cleanup to be able to close around 10 or 11 o'clock. Jennifer's younger sister Sarah was there, and her friend Amy Ayers, I'm sorry if I pronounced it incorrectly. She arrived shortly before that so they could wait for a ride home. Witnesses later remember some strange activity that night. A man in his 20s or 30s had gone into the shop to use the bathroom around 10 p.m. A couple who left just before the store closed remembered two men lingering at a corner table, one smoking and the other pacing back and forth outside. It's weird to even remember a time where people were allowed to smoke inside of places. But around midnight, the Austin police noticed flames coming from the windows of the store and called it in, not realizing the gruesome crime scene they were about to uncover. When firefighters extinguished the flames, they found the place had been ransacked. There was a safe that had been pried open, but very little cash was taken, suggesting the robbery was a ruse. They also discovered the bodies of 4 girls. 3 in the back storage room, and 1 in the front of the store. Everything here pointed to the fact that this crime had been planned out and organized by someone with experience in control and cover-up. The fire was started with a flammable liquid poured onto the bodies and floor as an attempt to destroy the evidence. The killer did not account for the building having a fire suppression system, which allowed the police to collect some of the evidence that was left behind. Police initially believed the crime to be committed by 2 people, thinking that they came in and forced the girls to the back of the store at gunpoint. Amy Ayers was only 13 years old. She was a middle school student and was Sarah's best friend. She was shy, but very artistic. She went to the shop after she had gotten done babysitting so she could catch a ride home. Sarah Harbison was only 15 years old. She was Jennifer's younger sister, a high school freshman. She was a cheerful and social girl and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Jennifer Harbison was only 17 years old. She was a high school senior and was a yogurt shop employee. She was said to be very outgoing and a leader, and she was saving money for college. That night, she was said to have been talking about how excited she had been for the holidays. Eliza Thomas was only 17 years old. She was also a high school senior who worked at the yogurt shop. She was into sports and played soccer, but was also very artistic. Her friends all said that she was a kind-hearted soul. She was planning to go to school for marine biology. Now, just to inform you that there's trigger warning here because there's going to be some detail about the events and how the bodies were found. So if you're sensitive to that type of thing, you might want to fast forward a little bit through this next part. Amy had been found separately from the rest of the group. She was found in the front of the area of the shop. She had been shot twice, once in the chest with a .380 caliber and once in the head with a .22 caliber gun. There were partial burns on her, about 25 to 30% of her body. Investigators were able to obtain some DNA from under her fingernails, which became crucial. Sarah had been bound with her own clothes and gagged with her own underwear. She had been shot in the back of the head with a .22 caliber gun. Her body had been severely charged, and they weren't able to get any evidence off of her body. Jennifer had been bound with her own clothes, gagged, sexually assaulted, and shot in the head with a .22 caliber gun. Her body had been mostly charred, and it was stacked in the back with Sarah's and Eliza's. Eliza was also bound with her own clothes, gagged, and shot in the head with a .22 caliber. Her body was severely burned as well. All 4 of the girls had been stripped of their clothing before the building was set on fire. I've read information that at least 3 of the 4 girls had been assaulted, but I'm not sure which ones besides Jennifer was proven. I guess that's where they got the DNA from her assault. Initially, from the crime scene, they found 4 .22 caliber bullets, 1 from Amy's head, 1 from each of the others, and the .380 from Amy's chest. And they found a spent .380 shell that was in a floor drain, which later became a crucial part of evidence that had been overlooked for years. The only DNA found at the scene was the semen from Jennifer's sexual assault, and DNA found from Amy's fingernails. They found cloth ligatures from whatever clothing the killer may have been wearing, and accelerant residue from arson at the scene. The biggest problem was that everything had been set on fire, so the whole place was covered in soot. There was no way to dust for fingerprints or search for any other type of DNA because of how badly the place was burned and because the bodies were burned. Police retained as much evidence as they could, but it really wasn't that much. They did find the back door unlocked and the bathroom door jammed. All the tables had been overturned except near the victims, which suggested that the killer or the killers were the last people in the store. I mean, to me, I worked at an ice cream shop and when I was younger, so it seems like maybe they started to clean up even though other people were in the shop to be able to get out on time. There was also very minimal theft. All the cash registered had been empty and only about $600 was taken from the safe. I believe there was more money in the safe, so why wouldn't you take all the money? It's just strange. Obviously, they just wanted it to look like it was a robbery. Early on, police believed it was 2 killers. There were 2 different guns used, so they assumed 2 guns, 2 killers. They looked at family members, they searched for drifters. Other early theories included a botched robbery, but the execution style shots and the assault suggested that this was sexually motivated. Obviously, the person who set everything on fire didn't think that they were going to be able to obtain any evidence from the assault. Austin police had launched a massive investigation and investigated over 5,000 tips. One of their stronger leads was a 15-year-old named Maurice Pierce, who had been arrested at the mall 8 days after the murders with a .22 caliber pistol, which was the same as one of the weapons used. A .22 caliber gun, though, isn't traceable, so there's really no way to say if he did or didn't do it. But he had confessed to being part of the murders, saying that his friend Forrest Melbourne had his gun and he drove the getaway car. Police had brought in Forrest Wellborn. I'm sorry, I said Melbourne the first time. Forrest Wellborn. And it was clear that he didn't know anything about what had happened. They also brought in Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen, who also denied involvement. They were all questioned but released due to lack of evidence. They were investigating serial killer Kenneth McDuff, which I don't really know anything about that, so I'll have to look him up. but he was active nearby, but was also ruled out because of an alibi. They had received dozens of confessions regarding this case, including McDuff on his execution day. 2 months after the murders, there were some tips that came in that there was some type of spiritual group that had been talking about the murders and taking some of the credit for them. Police conducted a raid of a woman's home that they believed was involved. While they found some theatrical pieces and some rat bones within the home, they found nothing that was harmful or had anything to do with the murders. There was also a sketch that had been made up of a man who was said to be sitting outside of the yogurt shop in a car that night. When the sketch was released, it had a striking resemblance to a man who was wanted for a sexual assault about 3 weeks earlier. He had fled to Mexico with 2 other people who were also wanted in connection with that sexual assault. Police in Mexico had said that 2 of the 3 people had been caught and arrested. Mexican police said that they had confessed and that they were going to be tried in Mexico. So the lead investigator on the case, John Jones, decided to go to Mexico and question the men as well. And some of the information just didn't match, like the type of guns that were used or other things that were at the scene of the crime. Jones had then decided to re-interview the men to see if their story was the same as before, and the men recanted their confessions. Jones believes it was because they were coerced by the Mexican authorities to admit to it. The case ended up going cold in 1998 because of lack of evidence and no new tips. But in 1999, New Austin PD Task Force had refocused on these 4 teens that were questioned but later released. Interrogations by Detective Hector Palencom, I believe that's how you pronounce it, yielded confessions from Michael Scott, who was 17 at the time of the crime, and Robert Springsteen, who was 18 at the time of the crime. These confessions implicated all 4 in a gang rape, robbery, murder plot. But there was no physical evidence that linked them to this crime. And there were huge inconsistencies with their statements. As an example, they admitted to the wrong fire starting method. The confessions were later recanted as coerced. But Michael Scott had been questioned over a period of 4 days. He told investigators that it was just supposed to be a simple robbery, but that it had gone wrong. He said that they cased the place during the day and later came back with 2 guns. He claimed he shot once, then he heard another gun go off. Investigators claimed that Springsteen corroborated the events that had happened that night, but he claims he went further and confessed to raping one of the girls. Now, in 2009, Robert Springsteen said in an interview with 48 Hours, "I was berated and berated and berated by the police officers until they obtained what it was they wanted to hear. They were not going to let me leave. Basically, they broke me down." I watched pieces of the footage of the interrogation, and really, you can kind of tell that they're stumbling over their own confessions and how they're kind of being guided with what the investigators are accusing them of. Like the, one guy, he's being questioned. He's like, well, I don't know, maybe it was like this. So, it was kind of clear that they were coerced a bit into this confession. Forrest Walborn denied being involved, even though the police were convinced that he was the lookout for that night. They'd questioned him multiple times, but he maintained his innocence. And I guess they questioned, I couldn't find anything about it, but I guess they questioned Pierce as well. But their charges were dropped pre-trial because they didn't confess to anything. But Scott and Springsteen didn't have such luck. In 2001, Scott was convicted to serve a life sentence, and in 2002, Springsteen was convicted to death, but was commuted to life sentence in 2006 after appeals, because the trials relied solely on confessions, and juries were unaware of the coercion claims. Between 2006 and 2009, appeals included confrontation clause violations. They used the two confessions against each other in court, but there was never a chance to cross-examine the other person, and they wouldn't testify against each other. So even though they won their appeals, there was a new district attorney who wanted to retry them. So she ordered to have all of the DNA retested with new technology that was kind of just starting to be used. This was the YSTR DNA, which is just male DNA, and would match any DNA taken from the person who submitted it without a doubt. So they had been in jail for a little while already. But the retesting had proven that this DNA didn't match any of the four accused. And it was Springsteen who had confessed to the rape. So if it was going to match, it would have matched his DNA. The charges were officially dismissed on October 28, 2009. The district attorney was still convinced that, at the time, all four men were somehow involved with the crime. She believed that there was another person maybe involved that they weren't telling police about. The men were released, but they weren't exonerated, so they could later be tried again if there was any new evidence that implicated them. The men sued, but lost because the court said that they were not proven innocent. This era kind of exposed the Austin PD flaws, like all their coercive tactics, their tunnel vision, and they ignored like hard evidence that excluded them from the crimes. A woman named Amber Fairley was part of both Springsteen and Scott's defense team. She believed that the killers were two people that the witnesses said they saw in the corner of that yogurt shop before it closed that no one could identify because officials could never track those people down. And they were described as wearing a fatigued colored jacket, like they both were wearing fatigued colored jackets and whispering to each other quietly in the corner. And if they were in that corner and there was that one corner table that really hadn't been overturned or whatever, I mean, it could have been two people sitting there who had done it. In 2010, a breakthrough had come along, and some of the degraded DNA was retested. And they retrieved partial DNA from the assault and the DNA under Amy's fingernails, but there was no matches in the system. In 2017, police searched for an online database to see if they could get a match. And this was a public database that they used for studies, and they found what they believed to be a match. Now, it was only partial. It wasn't full, so they weren't completely sure if it was a match. The sample from the crime scene, like I said, wasn't complete or detailed enough, but it was a place to start. The only problem was that this sample in the public database came from an anonymous person. It was submitted by the FBI, so it came from a federally convicted offender or detainee, but had no name attached. And authorities in Austin could not get any names due to privacy laws. But in early 2020, the FBI agreed to work with the Austin police to see if more testing could be done on the YSTR DNA. And the testing helped, but had also proven that the DNA was not a match to the person that they had found on that public system. So on August 3rd, 2022, the Homicide Victims Family Act was signed into law. It was motivated by the murders, and this law provided family members of cold case murder victims a way to officially request federal investigators to review the cases with the latest available technology. Which is so important because technology just advances so quickly that recently I've just seen cases after cases after cases being solved just by resubmitting DNA. It's pretty crazy. But anyway, back to the story. Detective Daniel Jackson was assigned to Austin PD's cold case unit in 2022. He grew up about 30 miles south of Austin and was familiar with the case because it happened when he was a little kid. He said that Amy Ayers was only 8 or 9 years older than him, so he lived with his whole life hearing about this tragedy. He took on the case in 2022. He was so anxious to do more testing because, like I said before, science advances so quickly that there's just every day there's something new that you could do with DNA testing that could possibly advance where you're at with the case. So then in late June of 2023, he thought about retesting that spent 380 casing that was found at the crime scene. The one, in the floor drain that was really one of the only pieces of physical evidence they found at the scene. All the victims that had been shot with a 22, but Amy was the only one shot with a 380. But within hours, he received a call from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives on July 2nd. The shell matched a 1998 Kentucky unsolved murder with similar details, like the victim was found bound with her own clothing. But the only problem was that the case was still unsolved. In August, Jackson brought in his request for similar YSTR DNA profiles to law enforcement agencies throughout the country. A South Carolina lab confirmed on August 22nd that it had a complete YSTR match to the unknown DNA from the yogurt shop case, from a sexual assault and murder case that had been solved. So when Jackson called up and spoke to the detective on that case in South Carolina, he also found the similarities between the victims, like being tied up with their own clothing. He also found out that the suspected killer, Robert Eugene Brashers, had committed suicide during a standoff with police in 1999. So Robert Eugene Brashers was a suspected serial killer linked to multiple deaths and rapes across the U.S. Since the ballistics match, Brashers has been found responsible for multiple crimes in the 1990s, ranging from shootings to sexual assault to murder in Tennessee, Missouri, and South Carolina. Some of his victims include a woman in Greenville, South Carolina, and Dyersburg, Tennessee, in 1990, and a mother and her 12-year-old daughter in Missouri in 1998. Brasher's criminal record goes back to 1985. He tried to kill a woman in Florida after she denied sexual advances towards her. One of the reasons he never got caught for his crimes was because he was using aliases, even his brother's name and date of birth, to get around the system. He once even posted an obituary for himself in the paper, which kind of did nothing since a few months later he was listed as a groomsman at a wedding in the same exact paper. Jackson also ran a background check on Brashers, and it turned out that 2 days after the yogurt shop murders, he had been arrested at the Texas-New Mexico line driving a stolen car. He was also found with a .380 caliber gun, the same model that was used to kill Amy. This was also the same gun he used to kill himself in Missouri in 1999. Brasher's body had been dug up and exhumed. On September 15th, Jackson submitted the unknown DNA that was found under Amy's fingernails. The statistics came back that this was a 2.5 million to 1 chance that the DNA was Brasher's. Some skeptics don't believe that Brashers acted alone, but there is no other evidence to support that there was another person that committed the crime with him. Unless, in my head, I don't know, I'm just thinking, if he was one of the 2 people in the corner of that yogurt shop whispering, who knows, maybe there was another person. They didn't find a 22 on him, they found the .380, so maybe the other person had the 22. But given all of the information that has been found within this case, and also that links it to other case. Jackson wants anyone who has this type of MO and other similarities in their cases to come forward and contact the Austin police. Especially if the weapon of use was a .380 caliber gun. And it would have been between the dates of 1989 to 1992, and then again in 1997 and 1998 when he was out of prison, because he was in prison for that time period in between. This case has influenced many, many different things, like books, Murdered Innocence by Corey Mitchell and Who Killed These Girls by Beverly Lowry. It's also influenced HBO's Yogurt Shop Murders that came out in 2025. And I have not seen it yet, but I will eventually watch it. I just don't have HBO right now, so I'm not going to watch it yet. The legacy we will not forget is the slogan. Annual memorials are held for the girls, and this case has really influenced many different cold case laws. The Harbison sisters' mother, Barbara, has become a huge vocal advocate and often recalled how her girls were in such a great mood that evening. The family's grief has fueled community memorials, including scholarships, school dedications, and there is a plaque at the site, even though now it is just a parking lot. This tragedy has finally come to an end, and hopefully the families can find some comfort in knowing that their killer can't hurt anybody else. As always, check out next week's episodes on Tuesday. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Until next week, guys.